Chapter 10. April. April closed her eyes against the sun and turned over in bed. Though she'd thought she would be elated, all she felt was empty. As empty as the other side of her bed when Carter had stood to gather his clothes the night before. "Where are you going?" she'd stupidly asked, thinking he was just hungry or in need of the bathroom.
"Home. I don't sleep over."
5 little words. That's all he'd said, but they'd landed like a knife in her chest. She'd known this about him. Lucia had warned her. Heck, so had a few of the other girls. But she'd thought it wouldn't matter. She'd thought they had something deeper developing between them than just casual dating. And even if that had turned out not to be true, she'd told herself she was liberated and independent, and that she could sleep with him and not think about it after. But she'd been wrong. Again. With a sigh, she grabbed the other pillow and covered her face. Why did she do this to herself? Every time she told herself it wouldn't matter. That she would enjoy the moment and feel fine after. But every time she felt used and worthless. So why did she keep doing it? That was the million-dollar question. But she knew the answer, even if she didn't want to admit it to herself. She was looking for love, for reassurance, for validation. The taunts from her middle school years when she'd still been overweight resonated in her mind like permanent lingering echoes. "Words can't hurt you," her mother had said. But they had. They'd taken root in her psyche and grown. Words and taunts and drawings and exclusions had formed her opinion of herself, and she'd spent the next few years trying to eat healthier and get into shape. Physically, she had succeeded. At least, she assumed she had from the looks she received. But mentally, she still fought that middle school image she had of herself. So she sought validation in men, telling herself that the fact they wanted to be intimate with her meant that she was pretty enough, good enough. And during the moment, it worked. But as soon as they left, that doubt would creep in again. "I'm insane," she whispered into the pillow, remembering the definition her high school English teacher had given. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. But she kept getting the same results, which meant it was time to change what she was doing instead. "What do I do?" she moaned. Of course, she knew that answer too. She could either stop sleeping with men or start dating different men. Men who wanted to settle down. Men who weren't seen with a different woman every few weeks. Men who weren't like Carter. She sighed again as she removed the pillow and kicked off the covers. But she liked Carter. He was nice and funny and handsome and rich, and she'd felt a connection with him. She was positive he'd felt it too. Maybe there was still a way to convince him they worked together. After all, it was just the next morning. She hadn't even given him a chance to dismiss her. Insanity! She shook her head as she rolled out of bed and headed for the bathroom. She was clearly insane. Different actions, she reminded herself. She needed different actions. But maybe those different actions could still help her win Carter over? She turned on the shower and peeled off her pajamas. Hot water would clear her head. She always felt better after a shower, clean and refreshed. But the turmoil didn't leave her this time. As hard as she scrubbed, she couldn't wipe away the dirty feeling. Couldn't convince herself that what she had done was right. Nor did she feel much better after breakfast and a cup of coffee. Even though she knew what Lucia would have said, she almost wished she were here to chat with. Sure, Lucia would tell her that she should respect herself more, that she shouldn't jump into bed with men, especially men like Carter. But that would be better than the silence that enveloped her now. deafening, accusing silence that hung like an invisible curtain around her. When her breakfast was finished, she rinsed the plate and set it in the dishwasher before grabbing her laptop. She had no appointments today, but she could use the time to see if anyone had answered her ads for renting the extra rooms. She'd be moving her own practice in soon, and she could really use the extra income. Yes, that was exactly the distraction she needed. Unfortunately, she still had no bites on her ads. She chewed on her bottom lip and reread her wording. It seemed okay, chipper and fun. The office was in a great part of town, so why wasn't she getting any bites? And worse, how long could she keep paying the bills if she didn't? Though she wasn't the best record keeper, she began the grueling task of compiling all of her financial information. It took much longer than she wanted, and by the time she finished, her stomach was rumbling again. She paused for lunch and studied the screen as she ate. There wasn't as much in the bank as she'd thought, and while she could cover the first month easily, and probably the second, she'd be in the red if she didn't get someone in by month 3. And if she couldn't work for any reason, she couldn't even think about that. Lucia had been right. With a sigh, she dropped her head in her hands, unsure of what she was supposed to do next. The buzzing of her phone pulled her from her pity party, and she glanced at the phone. When she realized the number flashing across the screen was Carter's, she perked up. He was calling her. She wasn't just a number to him, a notch in his bedpost. Last night hadn't been a mistake. She tried to control her emotions as she tapped the answer button. "Hello?" Her voice wasn't quite as nonchalant as she was hoping for, but at least she didn't sound like a giddy teenager who'd been staring at the phone willing it to ring.
"Hey, how's your day going?"
It was certainly going better now that he'd called, but she couldn't say that. "It's not bad. I've just been crunching numbers for the new office space. How about yours?"
"Can't complain. My body is sore from practice all week, but I slept like a baby."
At least one of them had. She, on the other hand, had tossed and turned most of the night, as she chided herself for sleeping with him.
"Look," he continued, "I know it's last minute, but I feel like getting out of my house. Would you like to go see a movie?"
April forced herself to pause and not jump on the invitation. "Yeah, I think I could make that happen. What time were you thinking?"
"Well, if you like action movies, there's a great one playing at 7:15. I could swing by and pick you up around 6:30, if that works."
April glanced at her watch. 6:30 was just a few hours away. It was definitely short notice, and part of her said she should tell him that was too soon. After all, she didn't want to seem desperate. But the other part of her was reveling in the fact that he'd called. The very next day. That had to mean he liked her. "Yeah, I can be ready. I'll see you then." She ended the call and stared down at the phone. Wow, she certainly hadn't expected this turn of events, but she would take it. Carter wanted to see her again. Maybe she didn't need to change her life after all.